Mr. Williams, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's nice to be at the committee here today. Thank you for welcoming me. Mr. Germain, we've heard this week from President-elect Trump, who's claimed that drugs are being transshipped from Canada to the U.S. How credible is that claim?
Well, we know that illegal commodities do go south, and we know that illegal commodities come north. We could talk about guns coming north. We could talk about drugs going south. Now, the actual quantum, I would not hazard to guess. I don't know if our law enforcement agencies can provide you with anything accurate. However, I would say that most statistics are based on seizures. So seizures in the United States or seizures in Canada. And you really have to sort of use a multiplier. Seizures, a very small percentage of illegal commodities are actually interdicted. So
and we have those stats, Mr. Germain. So of the 12 months up to September 2024, U.S. border agents seized 11,600 pounds of drugs entering the United States from Canada. Seizures of fentanyl doses more than tripled between 2023 and 2004, raising from 239,000 doses to 839. A year ago, HESA told Trudeau that they had identified more than 350 organized crime groups. So we have this stat. So I guess my next question is, how porous is our border? And I guess is the threat from, of course, the increased use of drugs, but the threat also from the United States credible in terms of stating that we have a porous border? We're not protecting this border at this point.
Yeah, I think that's the point. Now, you've got the statistics, so use a multiplier in terms of, how much actually is transiting north or transiting south. And yes, we do have problems. I mean, we've got an unprotected border. I get that. So, nothing's perfect. But as I mentioned, we've got ports without port police. We don't have a border patrol similar to the United States. So we have got issues. There's no question about it.
So the big question is, we've got issues. We've had a failure at the border, and this is now going to linger into a trade crisis. What do we do to fix these borders? What do we do to fix these ports? I think we've had some recommendations this week to increase scanners, to ensure we look at ensuring we provide more funding to CBSA. What are the recommendations to fix these porous borders in order to fix our trade relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I don't recommend just throwing more money, resources, and equipment at the issue. That's a bit of a stopgap. It's a Band-Aid. So you need that strategy. And there was a strategy some years ago, secure borders. And we looked at this very closely after 9/11. We didn't go quite as far as the Americans did, but we certainly did work with them. So I think we have to do that again. This is a time for us to get together with the United States and look at joint solutions. You just take any one of these issues. Let's say scanning. You're not going to scan all the containers coming into our ports, but developing better intelligence with foreign agencies that allows us to know when illegal substances are being shipped. Things like that are important. It all requires a large strategy.
And in terms of the ports as a whole, and you've talked about organized crime. So how vulnerable are our ports to organized crime at this moment?
Well, the issue is that you don't need a clearance to work in our ports. So there are 30,000 employees at Port Vancouver. Only something like 6,000 of them have a minimal security clearance. We couldn't get the exact numbers from Transport Canada, but it's about 20%. So you do have people with records that are working in the ports. Now, sure, 95% of people in the ports are upstanding citizens, but it's well documented through media reports and so forth that we do have an organized crime component, and that's important to deal with.
Have you seen, we've heard recently that there's increased cyber attacks on our ports, and that's also opening up our vulnerabilities. Have you heard of this? Have you written about this, and what can we do about that?
Yeah, no, I have not written about anything with respect to cyber. That's outside my purview, but it doesn't surprise me. And the thing to keep in mind is that our ports are very uh, are revolve around human beings, as opposed to very advanced ports in Europe are much more automated than ours are. So we do have that human component in our ports that you don't see in many other ports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our guests. Ms. Wells, I really truly appreciate your heartfelt testimony. My thoughts are with you. In this question, I don't know whether you'll have the answer. I don't have the answer as to what would save my brother. So I guess the question I would ask you is, what would have saved your daughter?
Not a poison drug supply. I think that if she wanted to use substances, we could have supported her, as long as we knew those substances weren't going to kill her. So, I'm a huge advocate for regulated drug supply.
Okay. Mr. German, question for you. I worked for a long time in aviation, 25 years aviation. I was what was known as a security specialist. There are some major events that took place in the 90s and in the 2000s that I feel precipitated some of the mess that we're dealing with right now. We were going down a coordinated effort with our U.S. counterparts, which I know you're probably very well aware of, the perimeter security. And I did a lot of work on that, as I think you did as well. And I'm just wondering if you think that if we had gone down the path, and perhaps maybe it's not too late to go down that, if we would be in the boat that we're in right now in terms of the fentanyl and the opioid crisis.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, to a certain extent, it's hypothetical, and looking backward yet forward. I think the reality is, yes, we should be working with our American friends. In terms of law enforcement, Canadian law enforcement works very well with its U.S. partners, always has. It doesn't matter which agency it is. So we have that ability. And I think that should be encouraged. And, probably what we're really saying is any national strategy in Canada should definitely be one that meshes well with the United States, because North America is really a one security zone. And we saw that with 9/11.
Yeah, thank you with that. So that's exactly the answer that I was looking for. We are one security system. And then immediately after 9/11, as you know, and I know, who was in control of the airspace? Canadians were, because we work very closely with our U.S. counterparts. There are some tenets to border security: intra-service, intra-agency, international cooperation, intelligence, obviously. We are dealing with the intermodality of shipments of drugs in a porous border system. What can we do to stop the flow of this now?
Yeah, well, we have to look at each of these components that we've already talked about, whether it's rail, ports, air, walking across the border, you name it. And that's where a strategy comes in. And some we're doing better in than others. And I mentioned airplanes. We all get checked very thoroughly before we get in that cabin. Maybe cargo could be, strengthened. I don't know. But it just seems to me that something like the ports as well as the 49th parallel just jump out at us.
Right. And you also, in your testimony, you nailed on something that was quite disturbing for those of us in aviation after 9/11, when the secure checks were going on our ramp personnel, and found out that less than 2% of our ramp personnel, those who are accessing our aircrafts, actually had red passes, and how many were actually in the system for 3 to 5 years and unable to get the security clearances. Now we're seeing the same on our port systems as well too. Care to comment on that?
Yeah, it's my understanding that after 9/11, the United States required that all people working in the ports have a minimal security clearance. I believe it's called a TWIC, TWIC.
That's
It's
right.
in my ports report. We didn't go that far in Canada. At this point, I mean, it's probably impossible for us all of a sudden to require a security clearance of, let's say, 30,000 people here. But we can start by grandfathering and any new person coming into port.
Right. And to that comment, is Canada seen as the weak link in the system because of our lacks and some of the things? Mind you, we do some things better, but we have fallen down in our obligation in certain areas. Is that correct?
Well, I think our people are doing the best they can with the tools they have and with the various restrictions that they have. But I think Mr. Trump's comment, for what it's worth, probably says it all. Whether it is reality or perception, we have to deal with it.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Next, Ms. Sidhu, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, all the witnesses, for your testimony.